Colorado's COVID deaths hit a level we've never seen, and we've yet to see any impact from Thanksgiving gatherings. We look at life after the vaccine, including the key group that's going to be forced back to work without the vaccine.
This is going to be a huge challenge for schools come January and February.
Denver's departing school chief, did she jump or was she pushed? We'll ask her. And ask the Coloradan who's vying to be the next man on the moon how he got started in that direction. Oh, it's coming, Denver. Impending white doom. It's just a touch of snow. Danielle says we've got this. Just like you, who heard that there were kids in Denver public housing that needed Christmas gifts, and you raised $120,000 overnight. That's going to cover groceries, too. Because you're good people, and because this is next. If I took 1 minute, to tell you about each Coloradan who died of COVID today, we would run out of time here. We're seeing more than 45 deaths a day, more than at any other time in this pandemic. Because of the lag in reporting deaths to the state, we've got to look back about a week and average things out. Day after Thanksgiving, 59 Coloradans died of COVID, the most ever on a single day. Yet the vaccine's in sight. An FDA advisory panel approved Pfizer's version today. It could arrive in Colorado as soon as next week. Our Nusha Roy considers what life will look like after the vaccine.
Don't worry, I'm not going to keep showing people getting poked in the arm throughout this story. I am going to introduce you to two health experts from UC Health and Denver Health talking about what happens after someone is vaccinated.
Are we still wearing masks and social distancing and paying attention to who we're hanging out with?
You should. And so there's a couple of caveats to this, obviously, is that certainly the second dose is necessary. So you have either 21 or 28 days between doses before you have potential protection. And then there's still probably another week or two after the second dose for that to be fully effective. The other piece of this, so you may be protected. The question is, though, is everybody else protected?
What is that critical threshold?
And some of this is, I don't know that we can truly predict. The idea, obviously, is that we want to limit the spread of the disease so that the disease goes away or goes to such a minimum that it's not overwhelming everybody's lives. One of the novel things about these vaccines is that they seem to work pretty well in people over the age of 65, which is fantastic. One thing that you should know, though, is that the data that they've collected so far is only a couple of months out.
For somebody who is vaccinated, can they still, they can still get COVID, and what do we know about how infectious they could be?
Yeah, and that's the $1 million question, and that's what we don't know. We presume you can still get infected, so you still have the virus, in secretions and could pass it on to somebody else.
Vulnerable populations get vaccinated, but then the general public is not. And how are those groups supposed to be interacting as we're working towards everyone getting vaccinated?
And once grandma's vaccinated, she's probably protected, but it's not perfect, and you could still potentially give that to her, or grandma could even potentially give you SARS-CoV, right? Very similar to what we've already said, you still have to take those other precautions.
So there is a lot of promising research about how these vaccines can prevent people from getting sick. And for those who do get sick, they can have milder symptoms. And then, of course, the big question, right? What happens to those infection rates? And, both experts were saying that there is so much still, Kyle, to learn about both of these vaccines that are kind of on the horizon at this point of being rolled out.
And certainly, Nusha, one really promising thing is that the effectiveness rate being so high means that we can have a lower percentage of the population vaccinated and still get the right effects. I imagine that this can be like the flu vaccine. Like, you're going to have to get this at some kind of a regular schedule, right?
Yeah, so, at this point, the experts say that there's no set rule on that yet, just because it's so new. But Michelle Barron with UC Health was suspecting that's kind of the way it's going to go. There's two things that they're looking at. And one is they were saying is that the coronavirus itself doesn't mutate as fast or as much as, let's say, the flu virus. The other thing that's going to be a big factor, too, though, is how long a person's immunity lasts. And all of that is going to be playing into how frequently people will need to get this vaccine.
Yeah, I think a lot of people who have had COVID think they have a hall pass. It's just nobody knows how long it lasts. All right, Anusha, thank you. Still no sign of a surge in hospitalizations as a result of Thanksgiving gatherings. Hospitalization numbers have plateaued at a really high level, though they are ticking down a bit, down 20 from yesterday to 1,545 patients, and that's down 250 patients from last week. No spike in new cases either, 3,800 new ones. That's well below our weekly average of 4,000. Public health experts say the window to see that post-Thanksgiving surge they think started on Monday and it ends about next Monday. Positivity rates still high enough to prove the virus is spreading widely in Colorado, but not like it was a few weeks ago. 9.6% of tests came back positive. It pulls our weekly average down to 11.7%. So Democratic Governor Jared Polis says that science is guiding his decision-making. Now, you can like or dislike the results, but public health experts have recommended the steps Colorado has taken. Until this week, when the governor ignored health guidance to immunize inmates early because prisons are obvious hotspots. I brought that up while talking vaccines with our COVID-19 coverage point man, Chris Vanderveen.
The reality is, Kyle, is that it doesn't make a great campaign slogan for anybody to go out and sort of say, hey, we're going to vaccinate a prisoner before we vaccinate your grandmother. The reality is, and the science is that the science is telling you that's precisely what you need to do. The problem is, as you've hit on quite eloquently, is that those two ideas are now clashing with each other. And this will not be the only ethical decision moving forward. You see very broad levels of people within those levels of vaccination, whether it be prisoners or other people. Some people are just going to simply move to the front of the line in front of other people, and there's going to be a lot of questioning as to whether that was the smart thing to do.
Teachers are in phase 2, roughly described as springtime. Schools want to get back in session in the second semester. The governor's pushing them to get back in session. So what that means is that teachers, the older folks in schools, are going to be sent back in pre-vaccination.
This is going to be a huge challenge for schools come January and February. And Kyle, you know this. A lot of school districts around the state are already readying their plans to get kids back in school by January and February. The problem is the same problems that existed back in November when they started to close schools still exist today. We can't test quickly. We don't know what the virus is doing. And with a lack of vaccination with teachers and with students, you're going to have some of the exact same problems that you experienced in November, just now back in January and February. How they deal with that will be a huge challenge. And quite frankly, Kyle, I don't know if they're up to that challenge right now, because what are they doing differently now? Or what are they going to do differently in January that they weren't doing in November? I don't see a lot of change in activity. There's some districts that are doing more testing, but this will be a huge story come January and February.
Chris also discussed the enormous pressure that's going to come on the state to open up once most of the vulnerable people have been vaccinated, before most people have the shot. That's in our full conversation. You can find it on the next YouTube channel. Colorado's Republican Party chairman and another congressman are now joining the legal effort to try and get judges to overturn President Trump's election laws. Party chair and Congressman Ken Buck and fellow Republican Congressman Doug Lamborn signed on in support of a lawsuit out of Texas, the one that's trying to throw out millions of Americans' votes in Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Colorado's outgoing Republican Congressman Scott Tipton did not sign on to this effort to overturn the election results. As you look back on 2020, give yourself credit for what you've overcome and for the good you have done. Your Word of Thanks micro-giving campaign has raised $2 million. One Colorado nonprofit a week, $5 at a time. In just 6 months, you have filled food banks from the heart of the city to the suburbs to the San Luis Valley. You got families that are homeless into housing, paid off all the school lunch debt in Greeley. During Colorado's worst wildfire season, you provided housing for evacuees in northern Colorado, long-term help for people who lost their home, and assistance for the families of injured firefighters. You connected young black men to mentors, funded the LGBT Center that lost its Pride Parade fundraiser. You paid for counseling for kids at risk of suicide, and you cleaned all the graffiti off Civic Center Park. You gave internet and tablets to isolated seniors, emergency funds for single mothers, assistance for refugees, PTSD therapy for veterans, vet care for pet owners who couldn't afford it. And you bought every single kid in Denver's public housing a holiday gift, along with groceries for their families. In a difficult year, you have created a powerful force for good in our community. Denver Public Schools' born and raised leader is leaving town. We'll ask if a dysfunctional school board forced her out. They see the true impact of the pandemic every day.
I think it's hard to understand what we go through from the outside.
An ICU nurse offers a unique inside look. And of all the Coloradans getting high these days, only these two could go to the moon. Next. Outgoing Denver School Superintendent Susana Cordova isn't burning bridges as she leaves town, though she is politely pointing out they are structurally deficient. She will not say what insiders have, that a dysfunctional school board made her job miserable and forced her to take a job out of state. Instead, she diplomatically told us today that respectful relationships are important at any job, and that having a shared goal is good.
It's really important that all of our school districts are served by boards of education that focus on goals, that measure the progress of the district. But I think it's really important that the board, seek a superintendent that they feel completely aligned with.
Cordova is going to Dallas. The school board, which is closely aligned with the teachers union and opposed to the so-called educational reformers, they're going to vote next week on confirming Senior Deputy Superintendent Dwight Jones as their interim superintendent.
After days of sunshine and 60s, finally a change up to our weather pattern today with the clouds, the cooler temperatures, and snow on the way tonight. This morning, though, the calm before the storm. So many of you sending us fabulous pictures of that sunrise. Gosh, it was so gorgeous, those cotton candy skies. Tonight, though, the snow taking over, especially across the western slope through our central mountains, and will be in our backyard by about 10, 11 o'clock tonight. Single digits and teens overnight in the mountains with 20s here in the metro area. You can see that snowfall pushing back in here to the city by about 11 o'clock. It'll continue overnight, and tomorrow morning you'll wake up possibly an inch. So not a ton of snow. It'll be off and on throughout much of the day tomorrow, and then by 11 o'clock, a bit of a lull. Daytime highs on the cooler side in the upper 20s and low 30s. One storm system moves out, another one moves in for the start of the weekend. This one brings us a bit more snow, so grand totals between both storms right now looking about 5 to 10 inches for our central mountains. Great news for skiers and snowboarders this weekend. Lots of powder here for the metro area, about 1 to 4 for the I-25 corridor. We keep it cool all the way through next week.
Coloradans could be walking on the moon by 2024. We've got 2 astronauts on NASA's Artemis team. NASA's picked 18 astronauts to lead America's return to the moon. Not all of them get to kick up moon dust, though. Most of the missions will work supporting the lunar landing. But 2 of these astronauts, 1 woman, 1 man, will actually set foot on the moon. How wild would it be if it was Jessica Watkins from Lafayette and Matthew Dominic from Wheat Ridge?
I was born after Apollo, and I was like, oh, I missed it. I don't get to go to the moon. But now I get to think about, or if you're a kid at home watching right now, you can think, wait a minute, like this guy I'm watching TV is going to be like working on the moon when I grow up and graduate college, and he's going to teach me how to operate this lunar base, and then he's going to go home and I'm going to go live on the moon, right? We're going to keep going back and forth, right? So you didn't miss it, guys. You can come join us on the moon.
There's some kid watching right now with their family. It's like, well, I want to go to the moon. Well, do it, girl. I mean, listen, this is the year. We can't even go to birthday parties. You want to go to the moon? Go to the moon. Nurses seeing COVID-19 up close are struggling to relay it to the rest of us.
Some people that have heard it have told me that it's exactly what they've been thinking in their heads but haven't been able to say.
She's trying to do it through song. Think of what ICU nurses have seen during this pandemic. Emily Wortham would like to tell you She works in the ICU at UC Health Highlands Ranch. This is her story in her voice.
I've loved music all my life. Music has gotten me through all of the hardest parts of my life. It's really important to me. We had a day today, trudging through the waters, trying to keep our heads above. My name's Emily Wortham. I am an ICU nurse at Highlands Ranch Hospital. We've been giving it our all. I definitely think working during COVID, I've been more stressed than I've ever been. From what I see, we're breaking and no one is listening. We're battling a giant and we're losing. For this whole pandemic, I've had a lot of difficulty putting into words how I really feel about what's going on. So I took a lot of those ideas and kind of just put it all into this song that I wrote. They are scared today. We try to hold them up, but there's not enough of us to ease the pain. It's a pretty sad theme to the song, but we do see a lot of families that aren't able to say goodbye to each other, aren't able to see each other. We see, nurses that are working so hard to get to everyone and comfort everyone, but there's so much to get accomplished and so many people to see that it's challenging. Try to save all the lives we touch, but it's not enough. We're not enough. Some people that have heard it have told me that it's exactly what they've been thinking in their heads but haven't been able to say. And I want us to all be able to kind of be united in those same thoughts and realize we're all going through it together. Barely keeping our heads above the waves.
Emily's song, through a lens of our photojournalist, Corky Scholl. Emily says she wrote the entire thing in one day. Record time for her. So, I have this crazy idea about taking an enormous family photo, like you and me and all of us. I'll explain next. The most Colorado thing we saw today is now a competition of unconventional Christmas trees. So yesterday, remember, is that guy up in Windsor who snags a tumbleweed and then paints and decorates it? Now it is Ella and her husband in Arvada who decided to deck out the elk antlers in their living room as a Christmas tree. You got some Wild West Christmas tradition that nobody knows about? Send it our way. Okay, so hear me out. I have this idea to take like a next family picture, all of us together but apart. It's not for a Christmas card or anything. It's for this new look that we're putting together for the program in the new year. You guys have really made Next into the place to gather each night for conversation for 4 years now, so I figure you guys should also be part of the face of the show. So that is where our big Next family photo comes in. Send me a selfie. It could be you along with anybody else that you watch the show with, and we are going to put a ton of these pictures into the new introduction for Next, and we'll have some other surprises as well. Go to 9news.com/next to upload your photo. 9news.com/next to upload your bit of our giant family photo. And then stay tuned and wait to see it all come together. You get the last word in feedback each and every night. A lot of folks want to talk about the vaccination schedule for Colorado's inmates. Tom says it is political suicide to give prisoners the vaccine, even though they account for large outbreaks. People don't realize prison employees can become spreaders in their community. I think about a lot of rural communities in Colorado where a ton of people work on the inside and what the implications are for them. They're going to get the vaccines in 1B. Other people in the prison won't get them until later. Jeff says, just occurred to me, but how do we know that your background is real, that it's not some green screen setup? Jeff, would I lie to you?